morning. May we ask everyone to please come forward? There are seats here in the front. Thank you. Okay. We have seats here in the front. I think you might be more comfortable here in front. We have seats here in the front row. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the press briefing of the APEC 2015 Senior Officials Meeting Chair, Undersecretary Laurel Del Rosario. Undersecretary Del Rosario will brief you on what has been discussed at the technical working group meetings and other related meetings, which began last May 10, 2015, and also what will be discussed during the second senior officials meeting tomorrow and on Thursday. After this, we will open the floor for your questions. Undersecretary.
Okay, good morning, everybody. It's always really a pleasure to be meeting with you. I know that we had a very good interaction at Clark, and because of that experience, I know that the meeting at here in Boracay will also be just as interesting for you. And I think during the second SOM meeting meetings, related meetings, the issues should be becoming clearer to you. And therefore, I'm here to lend further clarity on some of the issues that we're doing. First and foremost, of course, is this. There are now two emerging trends in our discussions, whether it's on any topic that we're covering. It's really the role of education and the role of science and technology. For instance, our biggest agenda this year is the promotion of services as a means for inclusive growth. We know that services in the Philippines is around 54 to 57% of our GDP, and we know that services provide areas for SMEs and micro SMEs to get involved in. And we also know that services are necessary for any activity that is related to manufacturing. In other words, I'll explain this later on. What I'm saying is that, in other words, manufacturing and services are necessarily bound together, and therefore we cannot separate them anymore as from the flesh. You cannot separate the flesh from the bone. Now, to start with, if I go, let's say, in the discussion of services, people in the discussion on the public policy dialogue on services, where the private sector came out, we saw that there's so many processes now in doing a product. For instance, there was a study done by OECD, and they compared the number of services done to produce a product. It can go as low as 37 forms of services to 77. For those of us who are not familiar with services and what they are, this can really be very fascinating, if not puzzling. Now, what are those 77 services involved? If you ask me, I can only name at most maybe 20 kinds of services, but these manufacturers broke it down into 77. So we have to find what the universe of services are so that we can get involved in them. Now, just to give you an example in manufacturing, let's say you produce a car. Before you produce a car, you go into the design of the car. That's a service. And then you go into the testing of the car. That's a service. And then you go into the research of the engine, further research. That's a service. You know, it's not a product. It's a service. And so on until you sell the car. It goes into the sales service. It goes into the advertising service. It goes into the advertisement. And then, of course, it goes into the customer service. So in other words, when you sell a car, it is not just producing a car. inside the factory. It's from beginning to end until, of course, you have the post-sale service. So if a product, therefore, is produced and we go into manufacturing, if we cannot get into the manufacturing itself of a product, we go into the various services that go into the manufacturing of a product. Now, and therefore, because of this, we realized that there's a crucial role between science and technology and innovation. We had a speaker from Chinese Taipei, and he told us that they are inventing and promoting and innovating 10,000 mobile devices, from smart bracelets, of course, to the Android phones. But the thing that caught everybody's attention was that now people don't need to get unskilled workers or semi-skilled workers. And this is something I think for us who are involved in human resources development should take a look at. They are now selling robots off the shelf. So if you are a car manufacturer, you don't need to have a human being do the welding, which is dangerous. He doesn't have to do the painting, which can be dangerous because of the chemicals. Therefore, car manufacturers now may buy welding robots and painting robots off the shelf, meaning this company can sell the robots that you need. So that's another trend. And I think the other thing that also struck us was he also said there's now a company that's selling a car prototype. You don't have to buy a car off the shelf. You can build your own car through 3D printing. And I think we all know what 3D printing is, isn't it? We can produce a product using a printer, a 3D printer, provided we have the right materials. And I think they're going to provide a high-tech engine on which to put your car. Now, this is where, and we're not talking of places like, for instance, the United States or Germany. These are being done here in Asia. So this speaker from Chinese Taipei, the CEO of Inventec, told us all of the things that they're doing. And then, of course, in agriculture, we know that agriculture is very important to us. And when we discuss how we can level up agriculture and level up the income of farmers, one speaker said, you cannot, he said, remove science from agriculture. He said that agriculture services are science-based, and therefore people tend to neglect them. And if we have to have agriculture extension workers, they should also be trained in science, because if you have to make your products more resilient, and we want to produce more per hectare or per acre, you have to use science, you have to use technology. And our farmers, therefore, have to have the best training in this. They have to have access to agricultural services and agricultural extension workers who can give them the best seeds, who can tell them what's the best method to improving the yield. Now, we're talking about yield because we know that the acreage or the hectareage used for agriculture has become smaller because of growing population, and because of the fact that with the growing population plus shrinking of agricultural farmlands, we have to improve the yield per hectare of our farmlands, and therefore science will definitely go into that. Now, of course, we went also into the discussion of fisheries, which is also about the inclusion of our fishing community, and definitely there has to be some steps taken on illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. We know that sometimes there are some big fishermen who deplete our resources because they have the bigger technology or the bigger equipment that can really fish more, thus depleting our small farmers who have to go farther out into the sea to get the catch that they need. So we believe that if we promote actions against what we call IUUF, illegal, unreported, and regulated fishing, and also if we follow the closed seasons, meaning we close seasons in certain areas, in our coastal areas, to allow the fish to spawn and to allow the small fry to grow, so that when they catch the fish, more or less, they are already given the chance to grow and to multiply, so to speak. So this is all on inclusive growth, and this is all about services that we do believe that services do do promote inclusive growth. That we cannot do things in the old way. We cannot just be talking about including the farmers, the fishermen into the inclusive growth without telling them this is the way. Okay. Second, of course, is another way of promoting inclusion or inclusive growth is through the internet. We have discussed the internet economy. We know that the internet economy is the best way, to connect everybody, even for us. We get lost if we do not get a Wi-Fi connection. And at the same time, we also know that for a small entity, for a small business, we need the internet. Now, we will be working on how we can empower our small producers, the SMEs, to get into the internet. The DOST is working on that. I was given an example by the DOST representative um, who told me that they were able to put a small enterprise on the net, and it got an order of 100 cases of very good coconut oil. And the order came one of the APEC economies. And that APEC economy was so pleased with the product that he ordered 1,000 cases. That's good news, right? The bad news is our producer cannot deliver 1,000 cases. In other words, when you are there, we connect you, the world suddenly becomes your market, or at least the APEC region becomes your market. And therefore, aside from connecting them to the net so that people will see that you are there, you have a storefront on the website, we should also capacitate our enterprises to level up so that they can level up their production, so that they can improve, the speed of their production and to maintain the quality of their production. Now, so that goes under the telecommunications working group and also the internet steering group. We're working on those. Now, there's another thing that we're working on, of course, like on the partnership for food security. I also already mentioned that. We're trying to work also on biodiversity of our ecosystems so that as we try to grow more food, as we try to harvest and also fish more resources, we do not really destroy the biodiversity of our system. And then it goes into, all of this, of course, will feed into human resources development working group. Knowing all this, we have to tell our HRD people, like the Department of Labor, who will have to work with our TESDA people, who will have to work with our DepEd and CHED people. We have to enrich the basic education in science, mathematics, and technology. Because these days, we cannot afford anymore to have people who will do things, as we call it, hindi na pwedeng mag-widow na lang tayo, di ba? Parang siguro pwede na ito, and then we work on the fly. We cannot do that. Everything should really be based on hard science, and I'm glad the Department of Education has added to the contact hours of basic subjects in the elementary education on science and mathematics. Now, going into science and technology, we will have, of course, a high-level policy dialogue on science and technology and innovation and how it can feed into our educational system. And of course, related to this, we're also talking about skills mapping. Many of our workers sometimes, or graduates, do not find the right jobs because on one hand, the industries will say, but we have this 150 openings and we can only get 10. It's because they don't have the right training. And some industries, sometimes they do provide the training, but at the same time, of course, they give preference to those who are already properly trained. So maybe we are now we are planning to propose that we do a study across the APEC region on obsolescence of jobs. There are some jobs that are becoming obsolete. And at the same time, there are now jobs that are emerging. One study, for instance, by Mercer, one study also by the Google Group, they said that in 2010, out of the 10 high demand jobs in 2010, that was 5 years ago, 6 of them did not exist in 2004. Can you imagine that? 60% of the jobs that were high in demand in 2010 did not exist 5 years before. And that was in 2010. You can just imagine now what new jobs are already being demanded. If you have a company like the one that I talked about that do smart bracelets, they are researching on 10,000 gadgets, mobile gadgets. We will really be needing people who can handle the maintenance of these gadgets, or maybe the handling of these gadgets, 10,000 of them. And of course, the latest studies show that as of last year, there were already 10 billion mobile devices out there in the hands of customers. 10 billion. And we're only 7 billion in this planet. That means there are some of us who have at least 3 mobile devices. And all these mobile devices need applications or software or anything that will make it run, right? And at the same time, of course, the needs of these gadgets keep on changing. The apps, as the young people call them, they have to be done almost every month. So when I talk to this gentleman who runs this big company that does this robot manufacturing, that does this 10,000 mobile devices, I asked him, I said, what keeps you awake at night? And he said, knowing that the competition is doing the same level and intensity of innovation, he said, that my company is doing. And yet at the same time, it is these companies that will provide jobs. And it is these companies that will need the services that are needed to produce these products. From computer design, software design, from application design, these are services. And definitely all of them do need more training at the basic level of science and mathematics, and at the higher level, they will need technology. Now, related to jobs, of course, the Philippines have an initiative called the Philippine Talent Map Initiative. The mapping initiative aims to enable the workforce landscape of the Philippines based on the APEC's 21st Century Skills Framework. As I said, we're trying to identify the skills now that the industries need, what jobs are becoming obsolete, and what jobs are emerging. So we have this. And talking about connectivity and how small enterprises can really go into, how they can connect to the outside world, there is an initiative on what they call the white space. The TV white space, it means this is an attempt, a plan for DOST and also in connection, of course, with our other ministries or agencies to make rural areas connected to the internet. So this TV white space, in a way, is part of our inclusion, is part of our inclusive growth initiative. And of course, the DOST has already put up centers where people can go to a computer. They give 3 computers per rural area so that they can connect to the web, to the internet. Now, on the internet economy, of course, we're also looking at how to protect the consumer. We know very well that sometimes the internet can be a nasty means for people to take advantage of others. Like there are some consumer data. We have to work on that, how to protect consumer data, especially if they give you, if you have, something about them. So it will go into cyberspace security also. So you see, we're moving into a new world. In fact, when I made an introduction, I said into where we are going as Philippines, we are really moving manufacturing now, plus services. We're not just looking at people working in an assembly line, which was 19th century, so to speak, or early 20th century. We're not thinking anymore of people in assembly lines. We're thinking of people doing services for a high-tech product. And therefore, I told my colleagues, you see, I said, you have to think, I said, Interstellar, the movie. We're entering a new galactic universe. For some of us, I said, we have to change our paradigm. We have to see this is how the new economy really, really looks like. It's a knowledge-based economy. It's a services-based economy. It's science, technology, and mathematics-based economy. And definitely, if it has to be inclusive, education will have to play a part, and our people should not take education for granted anymore. Our teachers should do their part, and hopefully in the future we have a better trained population, we have a better trained workforce. Thank you very much, and I'm now open to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Undersecretary Del Rosario. We will now open the floor for questions. May we request that we limit the discussion to APEC-related topics only. May we also request that you state your name and the news organization you belong to before addressing your question. The microphones are over here in the aisles. Thank you.
This time it's not nosebleed, no? Because when I was briefing some of you at Malacanang, they said, Ma'am, napaka-nosebleed ng issues. These are not nosebleed anymore. These are practical issues that we are addressing. And they will really impact into what everybody does at present and in the near future. And even for media, I think media is a service. For me right now, that's why I said I appreciate your role, because you are our connection. You are our connectivity framework to the outside world. Therefore, you are one of the precious services that we are developing and that we are trying to promote. That includes, of course, advertising. It's part of the whole economic world that we live in. Okay, questions?
Maybe we can take our first questions. The microphones are here in the aisles.
I think I covered all of your concerns. Agriculture is there, right? The farmers, the fisher folk, they're there. We're including them. We're including education. We're talking about connectivity up to the rural places. That's, for me, that's big. Through the TV white space, we're talking about centers for computers, for internet connections. We're also talking about protecting fishing. Okay, yes.
Nina Calleja from the Inquirer. I would just like to ask about the, you mentioned about a paradigm shift, having a knowledge-based economy and shifting from an assembly line to a manufacturing and services that have high value jobs. But do we have concrete actions? How can we reach that? How do we do that?
How to shift?
Yeah, how do we, I mean, for us in the media, we want to visualize what
How
should
it's
we
going
do?
to be done. Yes, because first you have to look at the manufacturing process. Like, for instance, in the past, when we bring in, let's say, the automotive assembly plants, that's easy because when the automotive assembly plants are put up, the parts of the car are already there, right? They're already painted. Okay, the parts are there. We just have to put them together. We are not involved in the basic production of a car. But assuming we bring a car manufacturer that will produce a car from scratch, let us not assume that that car manufacturer will hire car welders that you see in old videos of industrialization, or people who will spray paint a car. Spray painting for us was already high tech. This time it's robots who will do that. Okay, so we have to think, what will the next manufacturing workers look like? They have to be trained in computers because they will be dealing now with cars that are more and more computer software based. In fact, there's a term called now computer on wheels. That's a car. The car now is called computer on wheels. I mean, even for us now, isn't it? There are computers, guiding your car. In the future, when they put these more advanced computers that will make your car stop before it hits another car, that too is technology based. That is also computer skills based. And definitely, that's why we're looking into the skills mapping. Once you do a skills map, you have to know what industries are doing. And for me, this is the best service that we can do to TESDA and to DOLE. If we have to do skills mapping, we have to know the industries. We have to know what they need. We have to know their manufacturing procedure. In fact, I think if we can partner with the people, I think it was the World Bank that made a study on the number of services needed to produce a particular product in Japan. He did not mention which one. And also the OECD. They mentioned there were 77 services involved. Of course, he did not go into those services because we were looking at the trends. Our task now as government, and as I said, it's a new challenge, is to identify those essential services that we can get, that we can train people in, so that later on, when we get into the manufacturing sector, we will know more or less how to prepare those people. I know it's a very big challenge, as I said. For some people, it's an intergalactic travel because we don't know, we are not familiar with the innovations that have been happening in industries. But I think you already know the trend. I already talked to you about the self-driving car that they are trying to promote in the US. Of course, it's the Google car. And of course, the drone has already been discussed earlier so much. I think we're familiar with the drones, the small drones that people can hire or people can buy, so that these drones can perhaps monitor your hacienda, assuming you have a big farm, and you can monitor what's happening there. We can monitor our mountains and see where trees are needed, the denuded parts of our mountains. We can do that by drones with cameras. And there are some businesses who are already using drones. I think I shared with you the service done in New York, because New York is crowded. Sometimes you get stuck in traffic, and sometimes you get hungry while in traffic. You dial an application, pizza delivery by drone. So the pizza will drop near your window shield. You just open your window shield, the drone will drop your pizza there. You get your pizza, you eat while in traffic. Of course, the drone is guided by GPS. And of course, there's an application to order that pizza by drone. But this is already a service happening in very busy cities, in high-tech cities like New York. Now, will it happen in the Philippines? We don't know. How many years from now? We don't know. But definitely, even the services that we're doing now, even the taxi, remember? Grab a taxi, Grab Me, Uber. We're now using applications. The way also, by the way, because of internet, the way we do business will definitely also change. The tarpaulin advertisements will not be enough. Somehow we have to go to be connected to the web. Okay? I'm sorry I went beyond in answering that. I'm already going into the model of how we do business in the future. Another question, please.
We can take the second question now.
Good morning, Alan Palma of Manila Broadcasting Company. Ma'am, you mentioned about science and technology has a crucial role, especially to our economy. And if agriculture is science-based, do we have any alignment or programs or any mechanism, especially to our Department of Agriculture or to our agricultural sectors?
Yes, because I think the role of the DOST will really be crucial now, because they have to help the Department of Agriculture do some research. The problem with some of our farmers is that they're sometimes they are worried. I may be wrong, but my impression is that anything which is science engineered, they're a little wary of it. They think it's dangerous. But if you look at it from the point of view of resilience, that it cannot be easily destroyed, or you look at it from the point of view of longer shelf life, I think some of our farmers should really go into the researchers of the DA and the DOST. And I think the DOST really has widened its programs to really cover agriculture. They're doing a lot on agriculture research to help us. And of course, let's not even worry about rice. We have the International Rice Research Institute. in Los Baños has been there for maybe older than you are, young man. I have a feeling that that institution is older than you are. And it's there. And we just have to apply what has been, what has been discovered so that we'll have more rice varieties that are more enriched in nutrients, that are less susceptible to being destroyed by flooding if they are immersed too long in water. Or as I have mentioned earlier, in Bangladesh, because it's often flooded, the rice varieties, as researched by IRI, International Rice, they're very, very tall, so that if floods come, the grains will not fall into the water. In India, because it's always short of water, the rice stalks there are very, very short, so that at least it doesn't need too much water. In other words, science can really handle a lot of the environmental challenges that we are facing right now. And definitely, that's why we are doing this in APEC, to really create an awareness, not just among our government agencies, but among everybody, every Filipino, that the way we think and the way we do things, the way we decide, should really be based on data, on science. Okay.
We'd like to welcome last two questions. Thank you.
Okay. Good noon. I'm Jan Aguirre of the MNS TV. MNS TV, ma'am. I think one of the challenges on agriculture nowadays is that young people are not encouraged well through agriculture. They are more interested in computers. So I think I don't know, ma'am, what's on your opinion about this.
Yeah. In fact, that came out in our discussion. They said that nobody wants to go into farming. And this is, I think, a policy issue that every economy will look into. Like, for instance, we are protecting our small farmers, isn't it? And we are very suspicious of big farms. Now, if you are a small farmer and your children don't want to go into farming, what will you do with those that small farm? And of course, a big farm will find it easier to adapt to science-based processes and procedure, because they will have easier access to the technology perhaps, or they will have better trained people to run the farm, and therefore have better produce and more and higher yield, so to speak. Now, I think we are not alone here. There are also many countries in the developing region of APEC that have to deal with the small farmers. Now, for me, that's a national policy issue. What do you do with small farms? Then, assuming that the farmers want to keep their land, then definitely we can help them, right? Access to technology, access to resources, access to training, agriculture extension services. But if they don't want to go into farming anymore and they sell their land, how do you address that? I think we have to think of a land use management kind of thing, and then we'll see how we can still generate enough food. That's why we have what we call a policy partnership on food security. It's one of the issues that we're doing in APEC. Food security doesn't only mean that self-sufficiency in food. Like the Philippines, we want to be self-sufficient in food. Vietnam wants to be self-sufficient in food. But there are some countries who cannot be self-sufficient in food because they do not produce enough food, like Singapore and Japan and Hong Kong. Everything that Hong Kong eats is imported. Most of the things that Singapore eats is imported. Most of the things that Japan consumes is also imported. This is also under food security. We have to make sure that the trade in food remains open, that it does not become protectionist. Otherwise, it will limit access to food. So for us, food security is not just food self-sufficiency, it also means access to food through trade. That is also an issue we are discussing, making sure that protectionism doesn't enter into the trade world.
Thank you. We'll take Sarah.
Morning, ma'am. My name is Yellow from China Central Television. And here I have two questions. The first one is about the services you just mentioned. It's over 57% in the Philippines. I'm wondering that how many percentage the services is in the whole APAC region, or how important it is. And
Yeah, I think the APEC region is more than 60%. Because you see, Hong Kong is basically a services economy. Hong Kong. Singapore is heavy on services. All right? So those two alone, and of course the United States has a lot of services. So it's 60%, it's more than 60%. I just don't have the exact figure right now. That's why everybody is very excited about our initiative on services, because they think that we're so brave an economy to handle services, because the services negotiations in Geneva has become a little bit more complicated. And in fact, they already formed a small group called the Plurilateral Group on Trade in Services. They're discussing services. It's made up of a few number of countries in Geneva. But here in APEC, we're bringing it to everybody, whether we are member of that plurilateral group in Geneva or not. And for that, the members of APEC are grateful. But we are doing this because it's not only to bring a service to the APEC members or to work with them in cooperation with them, but because as a nation, and I think even China recognizes it, that services is really very, very important. It is already, as I said, the flesh and bone of manufacturing. You cannot detach one from the other, because manufacturing will not be complete without the services that go into it. And I already gave you the example of a car, how it's processed. Half of it, or more than half of it, is really services. Yeah.
And like for these APAC meetings, what kind of policies we can draft to benefit the services in the whole region?
We have to talk about, for instance, some of the developing economies are talking about building the capacity of developing economies deal with new kinds of services. So, but at the same time, of course, as we talk about building capacity, we should, for me, I believe we should not just rely on the outside world, but we should maybe look into our own capacity and see how we can level up ourselves. Then at the same time, if we can encourage, interaction of services, so that we will know what the other side is doing. Of course, one of the things that people are afraid here is what they call liberalization. People are always afraid that if we open up a service, liberalization, it will kill the domestic service. We are dealing with that because we know, as I said, there must be 100+ services kinds. There are some services that we can facilitate, definitely. For me, facilitation of services will be helpful, how we can help other economies come into us so that at least we can improve our own services or we can improve our own production level. There are others who say, please don't open up this particular service because we have high stakes in this. We recognize that. But those negotiations are in Geneva. But what we're talking about in APEC are the principles that we would like us to take so that our negotiators in Geneva, and as we deal with one another bilaterally, we will know what segments and what principles to offer. Definitely, cooperation in developing services capability is one. Definitely, building capacity is one. And I hope facilitation of the entry of services will also be one of them. Facilitation meaning you are open to having a service provider come in and you just have to facilitate this. An example that I can give you on this, for instance, science researchers, science teachers, they are service providers. Should we allow, for instance, scientists to enter our economies? They are service providers. In the Philippines, should we allow them, for instance, as one of the professions that we should open? As I said, this is a decision to be made by each economy, but the principles will be there on how we can deal with these challenges of the future. Every time I think of how the world looks like, more and more I think that a single economy cannot do it alone. We really need more cooperation in these fields, and therefore we can't afford to be protectionist anymore, especially if some economies are already moving so fast in their inventions, in their innovations, and pretty soon, if we have to use their products, if we have to maintain their products, if we have to produce their products back home, we have to keep up with their level of innovation and technological advancement. Okay?
Yep. And my second question is about the education. Because you just mentioned like agriculture, the science is very important. And in the whole region, we have some jobless problem. It's because of lack of training. And still we have to move from manufacturing to the services. It's still an education problem. So can we say that education is a key issue of this, all these problems?
Yes, yes. Even in agriculture, some if you, as one speaker said, agriculture sometimes, because agricultural services are science-based, people neglect them, or people don't try to understand them. Like, if I am a farmer, I need science in making sure that my seeds are of the best quality. I need science to make sure that as I nurture my plant, it's, it can address the climatic changes. Then when I harvest, I have to make sure I have a scientific way of prolonging the life. So we're talking of cold storage or low cold storage, because the kind of storage is also, it's not one size fits all. There are some cold storages that can kill fruits. Like, you don't freeze fruits. Once you get them out of the cold storage, they cannot sell them anymore. So it's this, this differentiation of the various needs of agriculture that we really need to study. And at the same time, maybe once we go into this kind of agriculture production, when we become more science-based and when we become more manufacturing-based. For me, agriculture is almost like manufacturing, isn't it? Because you manufacture food from the soil. Then maybe agriculture will not become something that people will want to run away from. It will really be something for me like, for me, a new world of, a new world for agriculture. And hopefully by then, our students who are more computer-oriented might see that their computer skills can be applied in agriculture services.
Yeah, and how can we improve our education levels? How can we cooperate with the whole region to improve our education levels?
Right now, we're working only at the higher education level because basic education is handled by each economy. And it's up to us, because some economists want to promote basic literacy, functional literacy. For us right now, okay, beyond basic and functional literacy, you have to give computational skills already and scientific reasoning and curiosity among the young, so that even if they drop out somewhere after grade 10, they have the basic framework of how to think logically. You see, right now, when we talk about teaching, what we need to teach our children at the basic level is how to collect information, how to use the information, how to connect the information, how to process the information, and then how to evaluate that information. It cannot be taught through rote learning. You cannot just teach a child to memorize. It's good to memorize the multiplication tables, but it's more important to teach them how to connect information, how to process it, how to evaluate. Because not every information is useful. Sometimes some information is even useless or misleading. Now at the higher level, of course, we're working on our APEC network of universities, and we're working on what we call education providers. In fact, we hope that in the future, we will have teachers, professors who can teach in the APEC region, so that their expertise and their knowledge can be shared among all. We're also working on the APEC student exchanges. If you notice during the first SOM, I talk about opening up scholarships, and we have some universities. We have how many right now? We have 6 universities already who are involved in the APEC University Scholarship Program, so that at least people will get to know one another, and at the same time, but that's a student level. But more importantly, we have to work at the educational services provider. That for me is key to the, what we call the inclusive growth. Growth cannot be achieved really without human resources development, without human capital investment. Okay?
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank
The
you.
gentleman at the back. This will be our final question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Kebiab from Inquirer.net. I have 2 questions. The first one, since the current tourism working group is about tourism and taxation, could we get to know the Philippines' input on on the inputs on tourism and taxation, especially since some of members are for or against
Again, tourism.
taxation on tourism? What is the Philippines' input on this topic? And my second question is, how do we, since much has been said about inclusive growth, how do we make sure that the economic growth that we're feeling right now and all the plans towards economic growth can trickle down to the ordinary people, or what we
Okay.
call the masses?
Okay,
Thank you.
we are not talking about trickle down, because we know that the trickle down, what do you call that, activity, sometimes it takes time, right? Some people have said, you shouldn't even think of the trickle down anymore. I think that's something that people have always talked about 20 years ago. We're now talking of upward. That's why we're going down to the level of the small and medium enterprises already. That's why even the policies already consider even those who are marginalized. Like for instance, in the women and the economy, we have a working group on that. We want to make sure that they are part of that. And part of this, of course, is the social enterprises activity initiative that our private sector, the ABAC group, are trying to promote. They will, of course, they have been doing this for a long time. And in the social enterprises, it's not corporate social responsibility where a big corporation does an activity for a group of people to help them. Okay, it's beyond that. When we talk of social enterprises, it means that if I produce a product, my ingredients should be sourced from my community. If I am a supermarket, I have to make sure that the vegetables that I sell will have minimal carbon footprint. It means that I have to source it from my community. If I have farmers, let's say I am a supermarket, in a big supermarket chain, let's say in Laguna, we hope that they will get their vegetables not from abroad, but from the farmers of Laguna. That for me is the social enterprise paradigm. So it's not trickle down. It's really, because trickle down is something, that is, when we talk about trickle down, how do you trickle down something that the big corporations do? The only thing for you is really to source from them whatever you need. And for me, that's really inclusion in the manufacturing process. Now about the taxation on tourism, I think it's still ongoing, so we don't know how it will be. Maybe by the third SOM, bring up that question again. I'll give you some concrete answers on that. Okay.
Thank you very much. This concludes our press briefing for this morning. Thank you very much, Undersecretary.
Okay.
Del
Thank you very
Rosario.
much, and I'll see you again. I think on the 21st. Yes, after the senior officials, then you can ask me more. But definitely, I already gave you a preview. These are the things that we'll be discussing, so you can pick up from where we are right now, and hopefully, I can give you some of the positions that are emerging on how we can do things and on the processes, especially the question. Yeah, okay, I can explain further also why we are not going into the trickle down, but rather into the from the base up. Okay, we're really going straight downwards, and then hopefully the growth will We start from the bottom up. Okay, thank you and good morning.